Greenfield for the Aberdeen School District. Thank you very much for your service. We acknowledge that it has been an extremely busy session, and we certainly appreciate all the work that you have done. Certainly, it was an exciting week for us. It's been quite a roller coaster for us educators and what's happening with school funding. Certainly appreciate, Al, your response this week and your diligence to listening to the debate and your yes vote on House Bill 1182. Very interested in hearing from Representative Greenfield this morning on her reluctance to support the Blue Ribbon Task Force recommendations, and if there's an additional source of funding out there, we would certainly like to hear some very specifics about that. The days are numbered. We need to hear specifically how this is going to be rolled out this week. This is terribly important. I can't get into all the issues this morning about why we need. I think it's really clear about the whole funding piece, but it's time to support our teachers and most importantly to support our kids. Thank you.
Well, I knew this was going to come up, and so I got something ready. It's been a very disturbing issue for me. As I said, I was a teacher for 37 years. I've had probably somewhere around 500 emails on this, Becky. And some were commending me for holding the line, and others, mostly teachers, have been scolding me. You know, I've seen the shame on yous, and I'm so disappointed. And so this is where I stand, and I'm sorry for the length of this, but I'm sure that this will try to answer a lot of the questions that some of you have on it. These are some of the reasons why I didn't support it. First of all, when you look at House Bill 1182, it's a tax bill. It goes under the guise of talking about education funding. Now, this is my point of view. It doesn't even mention teachers at all in it. It just starts talking about everything that they're going to tax. And I just, you know, I look at it and it's a red flag to me because I thought that there should be some specifics into it. Now, I'm getting on to the amendment later on down the way. I was, as I said, a teacher for 37 years. I took early retirement about 5 years ago. During that time, we were courted and cajoled to fund video lottery, to vote that bill in. And that was going to be the blue sky for the teachers. That was going to cover education funding for us. Well, that proved not to be true. And when we started asking questions, they said, oh, well, that went for property relief. Now your schools can fund you as they see fit. Well, it didn't happen. So that's the second reason why I didn't support it. I thought, this just sounds too familiar. Number three, I've heard many times in conversations the last 2 years about don't overturn the will of the people. When the people have spoken on a ballot measure, you go for it. We had a little heat last year with the youth minimum wage. Okay, that being said, in 2012, all of my counties in my district voted against the sales tax increase. And they voted against it in some towns, or some counties very heartily. And only 5 counties supported it. There were 2 college counties, there was 2 Indian counties, and there was Marshall County. And so, are we overturning the will of the people on the tax issue? I don't know. Now, the Blue Ribbon Task Force, and I'm coming to Mrs. Guffin, I want to tell you first of all that Mrs. Guffin is a hard worker. You should be very happy that she's here. She's a very respected individual, I know, in this town and across the state. And so this has nothing to do with Mrs. Guffin. The governor chose legislators and other members, mostly from the large cities, and I don't have any fault with them. They were asked and they served. Their findings were that teachers felt overworked, number 1, had very little prep time, too much paperwork, number 2, I believe it was number 3 was the pay. And so that didn't even come in as the first problem with the teachers. Now, the bill 1182 is a blank check. And it goes along with being turned over to the Senate through Senate Bills 131, 132, and 133. And they were all crafted either before the Blue Ribbon Task Force met, or during the Blue Ribbon Task Force, or after the Blue Ribbon Task Force, or possibly all three. And by the way, I've been asked, this isn't the Blue Ribbon Task Force's fault, I've been asked, why didn't that bill come from them? Where did it come from? And I said it came from out of the governor's office. It wasn't their bill. Now, some of us began questioning the non-specific language that was used and the evasive wording in the funding mechanism, and that was a red flag for me. So the arm twisting anyway began, and some was very brutal on our legislators, and I'm not ashamed to speak up as to what's going on out there. People were hauled in behind closed doors, and they were scolded, and they were made promises in order to keep this bill moving forward. On the day of the vote, a Watertown representative added an amendment to the bill, and this is a question that I've had. I'm trying to cover everything. He gave much credit to the amendment from the other Watertown legislator sitting across from him for coming up with a 63% promise for teacher funding. This also red flagged me, because this would include the vocational schools, 3% of it. Now, I don't know if, and Mrs. Guffin could answer this, the Blue Ribbon Task Force, to my knowledge, was never consulted and never talked at the vocational schools about their funding. So I don't think they should have been a part of the mix. It should have been K through 12 teacher funding. Also, the amendment that was being helped to draft by that other legislator was very interesting, because he also is a member of a Lake Area vocational school. So obviously he was funding part of an amendment to pay himself. I decided that that amendment could go forth without my help. And so we continued on the path with the vote. Now think about it. We have legislators on the task force, and now added many legislators from the large cities and the surrounding areas, who are not going to cast a vote against their cities and against their technical institutes. So most of them voted for it. However, they showed up one vote short, and now it got ugly. And all the ponies in place had to begin to do their work. Once again, the mass emails started to me, and all the shame on yous, and I'm so disgusted with you, and how dare you, having been a former teacher, started coming my way. And it was hard. The vocational schools, institutes, started asking me why I was so hard on them, that they were probably not going to get their teacher raise if this didn't go through. The Watertown lawyer representative got on Facebook, and he called me a corrupt politician and a liar when I did not vote for his amendment. When I lashed back about the games he played and the possible trouble that his fellow politician could get into, he got on KXLG in Watertown and told the listeners that the Big Stone representative and that Representative Lana Greenfield did not care for the teachers in our state, and we voted against them. Other members at this point were chided and derided. The mill was in action. Some of them had their cell numbers released. Some of us had our faces in the artist leader. We were the bad people. We were the naughty school children. And so they exposed us as being thus. This brings us to a reconsideration on Monday. My seatmate is going to vote yes, which will make it so that the vote possibly can pass unless somebody else flip-flops the other way. And I feel sorry for him, because if passed now, this is going to move on to the Senate and can be re-amended in any way that they want to do it, in any way. The big thing is, in the Senate, there's going to be winners and losers. The funding formula is going to be changed in one of the Senate bills. Now, this is going to mean that the schools, 200 or less, are going to be targeted because they're not going to get as much pay as the bigger schools. And so in order to try to achieve this target, They're going to either have to cut teachers or programs, or they're going to have to be forced into consolidation. And I believe that that's not the Blue Ribbon Task Force's fault. That comes well crafted out of the governor's office. The governor made a very serious mistake when he mentioned in the Sioux Falls Artist Leader that 400 teachers would have to be cut in order for this to be fair across the board. Well, I wonder where that's going to come from. Representative Westra testified, and he was also a member of the Blue Ribbon Task Force, and he testified that we're #2 in the nation for school funding reserves. We have that much in our school reserves. And now we want to put an additional tax on working people and the poor. We always hear out there about the working people and the poor and how we need to be kind to them and we need to have more programs for them. And now we're saying, forget it. We're going to tax you and put this on your backs because this is how we're going to fund something when we already have the money in place. I've talked to the appropriators. They said the money is there. House Bill 1130 is interesting because it revisits the video lottery. It would be a sustainable form of funding, and I think that the state should make very good on the promises that they made to people like me years ago when they blew it off and said it was going to be for property tax relief. One more thing. Teachers are not out there. We're fooling ourselves if we think they are. They're short in Alaska, they're short in Florida, they're short in Illinois, they're short all over. We baby boomers are retiring, and hence that's a huge part of the problem. Teaching has been talked down pay-wise, and it's going to be so hard to try to bring it back, and that concerns me more than everything because I loved being a teacher. I looked forward to every day as being a teacher, and I don't like to have this happen, and I will not happen, and that's why I'm standing my ground out there, that this better be earmarked for teachers, or I'm not going to be a part of this political corruption. Thank you.